Welcome to the Bona Iqiniso video tutorial on the Bona Iqiniso methodology. From the beginning, when we started working on Bona Iqiniso, our intention was to describe a software testing methodology that could easily be integrated in any way of doing software development. We also understood from the beginning that a new methodology, although there are no real software testing methodologies, would need a strong guidance to lower the threshold to start following our methodology. Because we took the decision to include a cognitive behavior approach, even before we started with the methodology, we also wanted the methodology to be incremental iterative, or based on continuous improvement cycles, where every new cycle would build on the previous cycle, adding new practices. To hit a hole in one, we knew that we had to have a great foundation for our Bona Iqiniso methodology. We knew we had to base our methodology on existing frameworks and methodologies, while emphasizing the practices that we considered as important. That's why we used certain ISO standards and a lean, agile, scaled agile development framework as the basis for Bona Iqiniso, because these frameworks already have proven their benefit and therefore would lower the barrier to start using Bona Iqiniso. Because we also chose for continuous improvement, we came to an approach based on capability and maturity. Capability stands for knowing how to execute a practice, where maturity stands for knowing which, when, and how to use a practice under certain circumstances. Although using cognitive behavior as a starting point will give a natural feel to the practices we suggest, and also will support a way of learning these practices via continuous improvement, we do need to know the rules that make from a bunch of practices a methodology. Based on the definition of methodology from the dictionary by Merriam-Webster, a methodology is a theoretical approach to a bunch of practices within a specific field of study. Now, our field of study is, of course, software testing, and our practices all are there for the benefit of software testing. Next to the methods, there are principles. Associated to the field of cognitive behavior psychology, we have natural feel, continuous improvement, working task-based by following a workflow based on context, concept, implementation, verification, and validation. Associated to lean software development, we have people centricity, putting the development team and customer front and center, reduce any form of waste as described in lean, answer all the WH questions, and quality-based, where we focus on people, product, process, project, and productivity. These are the 7 principles of Bona Iqiniso. The qualitative and quantitative techniques are the subject of all the videos that will follow, and the complete set of video tutorials will contain examples, will contain the tool, and all of that will create, in fact, the paradigm. Because of the continuous improvement character of both Bona Iqiniso and the software development approaches we built Bona Iqiniso on, there is a cyclic life cycle with 5 phases: context, concept, implementation, verification, and validation. These 5 phases can also be recognized in the Kaizen improvement lifecycle associated with lean software development. It is also called the 5S improvement lifecycle, where the 5S stands for self-assess, sort, sweep, standardize, sustain. Self-assess can be seen as to determine the context of what you are doing. Sort, determine your concept or what a possible solution could be. Sweep, based on the roadmap, on the project planning, determine what functionality needs to be implemented and tested. Standardize, verification, to implement the functionality. Sustain, validation, to maintain there is no regression going into the next cycle. In the following slides, I will show you the theoretical model of Bona Iqiniso. But before we start with that, just a moment of reflection. The definition of the word methodology in fact says nothing about tools that can be used to support a methodology. But it is unthinkable that for software development or testing, there would be no tools. Reality teaches us that in software development projects, there are between 3 and 7 tools that will be used for a variety of support, like project planning, defect management, configuration management, code repositories, etc. This is a source of a number of items of waste, like, for instance, overproduction. The same information goes into different tools. Moving data needs to be synchronized between the tools. Defects. Copying data between tools is an error-prone process. You forget one, and you have 2 versions of the same piece of data, and you don't know anymore which one is relevant. These are forms of waste as defined in Lean, and for now it is enough to know that waste kills efficiency. Since efficiency is part of productivity, it is counterproductive to what we want to achieve. Hence the reason we want a single tool to support Bona Iqiniso. Although not mandatory, it is strongly recommended to keep the number of tools to a strict minimum. The theoretical model of Bona Iqiniso is there to explain why we do what we do. The theoretical model assembles all the above together. The Bona Iqiniso methodology is characterized by a cyclic life cycle, where during each cycle a bunch of practices are executed. Because of their nature, these practices can be seen as processes. And a typical definition for a process contains the input and output products, as well as an indication of who is the supplier and who is the client of the process, the recipient. This is, in a nutshell, the meta model of Bona Iqiniso. Does it cover all? No, not at all. But it should explain why we took the approach described in the next slides. I mentioned before that we based Bona Iqiniso on existing standards and frameworks. Some of these standards are ISO or IEEE standards handling lifecycle processes for software and systems. The ISO standards 12207 and 15288. ISO regularly reviews these standards, and the last time they did this was in 2017. Now, Bona Iqiniso, we started with it in 2015, so it is based on the previous version, which is the version of 2008. And although the 2017 version has less core processes, there is no real difference between the 2 versions. Some of the processes have been integrated in each other, and this is to reflect the current popular ways of doing software development. But to explain the theoretical model of Bona Iqiniso and where it comes from, we must use the 2008 version. It is possible that later in the tutorials we will refer to these processes again, and perhaps at that point we will be using the 2017 version. Again, they are interchangeable. For Bona Iqiniso, both versions are valid. Even more, because we are not using all processes in Bona Iqiniso, remember that we are describing a software testing methodology and not a software development methodology. For Bona Iqiniso, there are two groups of processes that are important. Processes part of software testing and processes that support the software testing processes. To be honest, the process names used in the ISO standard 12207 of 2008 are a bit confusing, or at least don't cover the content of the process. We could go deeper into each of these processes, but I think it's more important to just explain how we got to the theoretical model of Bona Iqiniso. We anyhow will be regrouping and renaming the processes to fit a software testing methodology. A first step is to rearrange the processes. This way it becomes clear what the workflow will be in the software testing process. The 7 processes that form the core of software testing are related to topics like vertical and horizontal traceability, reviewing, acceptance criteria, preparing for verification, and executing verification and validation. The 3 supporting processes they cover process assurance, problem solving, and configuration management. This by no means that other processes are not important and not necessary. It just means that for Bona Iqiniso to be a software testing methodology, these processes are enough. Later on, discussing the practices in more detail, we will be showing the links to other processes. At the top, we have the software quality assurance process that we tag with the words vertical traceability. Purpose of the software quality assurance process is to provide assurance that work products and processes comply with predefined provisions and plans. This process is necessary to establish traceability between requirements and delivery planning, releases, sprint, and so on. Often referred to as vertical traceability. This also means that this process holds the description of the product being built. Some will call it a product backlog, but in Bona Iqiniso we call it the application board. The system qualification process ensures that the implementation of each system requirement is tested for compliance and that the system is ready for delivery. This process is necessary to accomplish traceability between requirements and tests, often referred to as horizontal traceability. The review process maintains a common understanding with the stakeholders of the product being built. This process is necessary for software testing to determine the test basis, to clarify contradictions in the requirements, to fill in the gaps, to explain assumptions, and so on. The system qualification process, together with the review process, they form the business domain pillar in Bona Iqiniso. Although horizontal traceability also covers the more technical part, we still consider it the business domain for the simple reason that the hook for these two processes is the business domain and what they need and what they want to be satisfied. The software acceptance process assists the acquirer, the customer of the software, to achieve confidence that the product meets his requirements. This process is necessary to accomplish user acceptance. User acceptance is often prepared and even executed by software test engineers. In the Agile methodology, users have the product owner as key stakeholder in the acceptance process. The software qualification process confirms that the integrated software product meets its defined requirements. This process is necessary to accomplish verification of the integrated product and verification of the integration of the product with other products. In software testing, this is often referred to as system testing and system integration testing. The software verification process confirms that each software work product and/or service of a process or project properly reflects the specified requirements. This process is necessary to accomplish test coverage. This process covers the test execution, the logging of defects, and test reporting. The software validation process confirms that the requirements for a specific intended use of the software product are fulfilled. This process is necessary to testify the validity of the product as developed is suitable for its intended use. Software acceptance, software qualification, verification and validation form the testing board in Bona Iqiniso. The configuration management establishes and maintains the integrity of all identified outputs of a project or process and makes them available to concerned parties. With configuration management, you also define each and every baseline for each sprint and/or release. Bona Iqiniso has a cyclic life cycle, and each cycle corresponds to a sprint and/or release. The baseline in the configuration management will form the roadmap. In the previous video, we discussed the basis of Bona Iqiniso and the fact that we have 4 pillars in Bona Iqiniso: business domain, application board, roadmap, and testing board. In the previous slide, we explained how we came to these 4 pillars. But to start with, configuration management is not a software testing process, and yet it forms one of the pillars of Bona Iqiniso. That's because we need to fit Bona Iqiniso into a software development lifecycle, and the roadmap is the way to do this. In contemporary software development methods, all products are built iterative incremental. This roadmap uses the application board, business domain, and testing board in a perfect symbiosis. It feeds on them, receives products from these processes, but also provides the glue between them. Where there is testing, there are defects, and every product has defects. That's the reason why we also need a supporting process for problem solving. These problems or defects should always be related to the business domain and may trigger a revision to be done by the business. Last but not least, the audit process assures that we covered our bases. Following a workflow or a process should build confidence in the way the product is made. As mentioned, the processes just described are used in the Bona Iqiniso lifecycle and therefore in the software development lifecycle. The Bona Iqiniso principle that we have to work task-based leads to all these processes defining a bunch of activities and tasks that led to the creation of the Bona Iqiniso wheel. In the next videos we will go into more detail, but for now remember that the theoretical model of Bona Iqiniso is based on 4 pillars. There are activities supporting software testing and software development, and there are activities that enable the testing and development of the product. That's how we derived the theoretical model of Bona Iqiniso from ISO standards. To summarize, Bona Iqiniso is a methodology for software testing. It has a cyclic life cycle with 5 phases: self-assess, context; sort, concept; sweep, implement; standardize, verification; sustain, validation. The practices and/or methods for Bona Iqiniso find their origin in the ISO standard 12207, and there we marked 10 processes as important for Bona Iqiniso. The 7 processes that are needed in software testing are software quality assurance or vertical traceability or the application board, system qualification or horizontal traceability, software review or static testing, forming together with the system qualification the business domain, software acceptance or user acceptance, software qualification or system testing, software verification or test coverage, and software validation or user acceptance. And the last four, they form the testing board. The three processes that support software testing are configuration management, or the baselines that form the roadmap, software problem resolution or defect management, software audit, or process quality. In the next videos, I will be discussing the four pillars of Bona Iqiniso in more detail. Please join me.